Coaching in Session,
your exclusive destination for unparalleled personal and professional growth.
With your host, Michael Rearden.
Whether you choose to live within limits or break free, your mindset journey begins here.
Going on, Davin?
Hey, Mike. How are you?
Good. We're just going to dive right in. Could you just tell us a little bit about your work, how you got into it, maybe if you came from another career?
Sure. So yeah, I'll start kind of in the beginning. So went to school to be a teacher. That was something I always wanted to do. While I was putting myself through school to become a teacher, I got caught up in kind of corporate America. I got an amazing job working for Costco in 2001 and worked for them for 7 years. And while I was with Costco, I met the founder and CEO of Costco, Jim Sinegal, and we had an interaction that changed the entire trajectory of my career. I learned a lot about what really great leadership looks like, what really healthy cultures look like, and for the first time, what helping people find fulfillment and purpose in their work look like. I then got recruited by Macy's to go do some cultural and leadership work for them and worked for them for 3 years, and then got recruited by CVS Health and went and worked for them for 7 years. And in all three of those, at Costco, Macy's, and at CVS, what I found a genuine passion for was really helping people discover what their gifts, talents, abilities, and skill sets were and how they use those every day at work to make a difference. And so in 2016, I left the corporate world, started my own consulting company, called it Purpose Point. And the whole idea was to help companies remember the founding purpose for why they started and to help those companies help their people remember what their purpose is and why they chose to work inside those companies. In 2019, I then wrote a book called Finding Purpose at Work, which was based off of these two worlds. How do we find purpose and fulfillment in the work that we do? A book became a bestseller. I went on a speaking tour, met some amazing other authors, business leaders, and thought leaders in the purpose leadership space. And then in 2019, that same year, we decided to do a summit called the Purpose Summit, where we invited a lot of the companies that we knew who were doing this well. They were speaking about their purpose, who they are, why they exist, the difference that they want to make in the world, and how they were helping their employees discover that same thing for themselves at work. That summit went on for the next 5 years. We'll be doing it a sixth year this year, actually in just a couple months. And then along that journey, I wrote another book called Thieves of Purpose, which actually just came out this year. And after spending more than a decade talking about how to find purpose and individually, organizationally, how to apply that, I started to, ask myself, why don't more people do this? And what I discovered was that there were 12 things that each person struggles with that robs them every day of stepping into their fullness and potential. So I did some research and wrote a book on how to identify those 12 things and how to overcome the mindsets that rob us of our potential. And that just became a #1 Amazon bestseller a couple of weeks ago. And so that brings us to today and our awesome discussion together.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm definitely going to look at that Thieves of Purpose book because it's so important to understand maybe our blind spots or our shadow selves. Because if people are operating in the realm of they don't know who they are or they feel stuck all the time, we can definitely look at, well, what is your purpose? What is your meaning? And one of the things you brought up early on, you used to be a teacher, and a teacher is a natural leader for the classroom, for the school. You have a bunch of little ones, in a sense. Maybe if it's high school, you have a bunch of teens looking at you and saying, okay, whether they like you or not, they're going to get something from you, right? Not just knowledge and education, but they're going to learn demeanor. They're going to learn maybe how to be a man, or if you're a husband, how to be a husband or something like that, because they're just going to see life living through your lens. And teens do a really good job at understanding the teachers who really care, the teachers who really want to, put effort into them versus the teachers that are already checked out and, they have tenured and they're just waiting for retirement. They are extremely astute. And so one of the questions I want to ask is, to be a leader, what are some of the key components you need to have?
So good. And I wrote about this in the first book, Finding Purpose at Work. But #1, you have to be others focused. So there's so many, there's such a delineation between manager and leader. A lot of organizations have managers. And the reality is nobody wants to be managed. People want to be led. They want to be coached. And there's a difference between managing, leading, and coaching. When it comes to leading, it's all about bringing someone towards their potential or towards a positive outcome, or helping them become who they are created to be, or the best version of themselves. It's helping them accomplish something. Managing is about systems and processes. And so you talked about the teaching world. Part of the reason that I love being a teacher and wanted to pursue that career is because a big piece of who I am is because of who the teachers that I had early in my life shaped me to be. As you said, they were natural born leaders because they were thinking outside of themselves. They were others focused. They had a job to do. They had a curriculum to follow. They could have very easily have just managed the curriculum, managed the classroom, but they took an active, others focused interest in me as a person and not just as a student, and in helping me discover who I am and what makes me unique, and maybe even think about which direction I want to go in my life. And that's no different than people who are in leadership in any different organization, sector, or industry. Leadership is all about seeing people not as who they are, but as who they can be, and then helping lead them to be that person. Coaching is an element within leadership. We can dive in that maybe a little bit later. But number one is being others focused and helping people become who they want to become or who they were created to become. The other three, being highly accessible. I often share that your greatest ability is your availability. There's a lot of leaders out there who are highly unavailable and unapproachable. And some of the greatest leaders that I know are highly available and highly approachable. And you need to make sure that doesn't necessarily mean that you need to be all things to all people. It just means that you need to be all of you to the person that's right in front of you right now. I've been in front of people who, it's very, very clear just from their body language, or if they're looking behind me or whatever the case is, that they're not present. I'm clearly not their priority. They may have given me their time, but they're really not available. Their mindset is elsewhere. So you got to be present. Your greatest ability is your availability. Make sure that you're all of who you are to the person that's right in front of you, that you're actively listening, you're fully present in the moment, so that you can listen in a way that when you respond will actually lead them. And this exists in every area of life, probably most so in the home. I see one of my favorite videos ever created was one called "It's Not About the Nail," and it's a husband and wife couple that are sitting on a couch, and the wife has all this pain and aching in her head, and she has kind of this, like, you can't see it because it's a side profile and her hair is covering it, and when she finally turns her head, you can see that there's a nail in her forehead, and all the husband wants to do is pull the nail out. Let's fix the problem, right? And she's complaining about all this, and all she really wants is for him to listen and to be present and to be heard. And a lot of times what happens as leaders is we see the problem and we want to fix the problem. And a lot of times the people that we're leading, they want to be seen, they want to be heard, they want to be valued. It doesn't mean that they don't want the problem solved. It means that they just want to be seen, heard, and valued first. And then once you do that, then you can solve the problem together. But you can't get to that point if you're not fully present, you're not highly available, and you're not highly accessible. Third, and this is probably my favorite question, is to simply ask, how can I help? Great leaders, a lot of times, they're more focused on looking for opportunities to serve than they are looking for opportunities to be applauded. There's a lot of leaders out there, unfortunately, who have no problem shouting their accolades, what they've accomplished. There's a lot of rah-rah leaders out there. But the best leaders, there's a great book written by Tim Keller called The Freedom of Self-Forgetfulness. And the best leaders that I know out there are completely not focused on themselves at all. They are fully focused on opportunities to serve, and they step into those opportunities to serve. And that's where purpose lives. One of my favorite shows that was ever on TV is a show called New Amsterdam. And Max, who is the medical director in that show, is the executive director of this hospital. And in every episode, he's running into crisis situations and he's asking, how can I help? How can I help? How can I help? He truly is a servant leader by asking that question. And then the fourth, and this might surprise someone, is to always be coachable. We've never arrived. I don't know everything. You don't know everything. Even the best leaders in the world haven't learned everything. And so some of the best leaders that I know are constant lifelong learners. They themselves are also being coached. So that's something that, unfortunately, I see way too many leaders. They fall into the trap of thinking they have it all figured out. They're not open to feedback. They're not open to constructive criticism. They're not open to other ideas or ideals or perspectives. And unfortunately, that makes for very poor leadership. So as a leader, you need to be open-minded and always be coachable and constantly wanting to learn something new.
Yeah, great points. One of the areas you said being available. And I believe when people are stepping into leadership, they do want to be available as much as possible. But then sometimes I believe they maybe allow boundaries that shouldn't be crossed to be crossed. And so how would a leader know and be able to define what boundaries should be crossed and not be crossed if they are going to be available to so many people?
Well, boundaries sometimes get a bad rap. And boundaries actually, when established and communicated the right way, are very, very healthy. Probably one of the best visualizations that I ever saw about boundaries, and I'll tie that back to your question. I have two kids. I've got a 14-year-old daughter, a 10-year-old son, and there was a time when they were younger and they would just want to go run out in the backyard and play. And we'd open the door and let them go run out in the backyard and play. And it was fine because there were other houses in our neighborhood behind us. They knew to stay in the backyard. And so I knew that they were going to be okay. Now, if our house had backed up to a major highway and I didn't have a fence around my yard, I would be much more reluctant to let them just go outside and play because there's the danger. They don't know what they could go run out into the highway and get hit by a car. But by putting a fence up, or even if I don't have a fence, by saying, hey, don't go by the highway or stay in this perimeter of the yard and setting those boundaries in place, that boundary is healthy because I'm preventing them from harm. And as long as I communicate that boundary, they understand why the boundary exists, and therefore they don't cross it. They stay within it because it's good for them. It's not a control thing. It's actually an act of love. All too often, we have leaders that create boundaries and people don't know why. They have no idea why those boundaries exist. And then they cross them because they don't understand that those boundaries were actually there for their protection. Sometimes those boundaries aren't actually for the protection of the people they're leading. Sometimes, unfortunately, the boundaries that the leaders put in place are there for themselves, in which case that actually makes them highly unavailable, right? And then that's a whole different conversation. So the question that you first have to ask yourself is, if you're a leader and you're putting boundaries in place, who do those boundaries exist for? Are those boundaries there for your people to protect them? For your organization to protect certain values, to protect certain ideals, to protect, whatever, or just to protect the people in general? Or are you putting those boundaries in there because you're self-focused and you're trying to protect yourself? In which case might actually make you highly unavailable, which then might not make you a great leader.
Yeah. It's synonymous almost to the idea of expectations and rules, where you can have good rules, you can have bad rules, you can have good expectations, you can have bad expectations, especially like if you have workers, for example, and let's say someone is really good at doing, PowerPoints or something, and they're overloaded. And you have a new project coming out and you need your best person on the job. So he's or she is literally swamped with all of these PowerPoints. And then you go on and you give them a new one, right? Now, what that person should do is, I forget the name of the book, but he has like a whole board of all the tasks he has to do. And then he would take the boss or the leader over there and says, okay, these are all the projects I'm working on right now. These are their due dates. Which one do you want me not to do so I can do this one? That's and right. It puts it in perspective to the leader saying, wow, their plate is full. Let me figure out someone else who I can give it to, right? So the expectation for the leader might be, I'm going to give it to my best man, best girl. And the person's like, listen, like if I want to keep doing good work and to have that, good results that I'm getting, I can't burden myself or overload myself to the point of burnout. So in a sense, is a boundaries. It's an expectation. Maybe they created a rule for, like, let's have some open communication. And I believe when it comes to leadership, it's important to listen.
That's
It's
right.
important to understand. It's important to not just, be so authoritative, saying, okay, this is my way or the highway. That's probably the quickest way to lose people. And, one of the things I think many companies struggle with is they lose the idea of what the company is doing, right? The goal might be to make money, of course, but where is the vision? Where is the purpose? And so you talked about the purpose point, and I wanted to ask you, is there a difference between purpose and vision within a company typically?
There absolutely is. There's actually a difference between purpose, mission, vision, and why. These four words constantly get convoluted and used in the same way when they're four very, very different things. Purpose is your reason for being. It is literally the thing that you exist to do. Your mission is the impact of that purpose. So here's the difference that happens when your purpose is activated. Your vision is actually the impact of doing your mission at scale. And I'll explain that in a minute. And then your why is your reason for doing it. There's the motivation behind the entire thing. So let me pair these up for you, and let me just take purpose and why for a second, the bookends, and then we'll go to mission and vision. Purpose and why. Purpose is your reason for being. Why is your reason for doing. I could be very clear about what my purpose is. I've got a purpose as an author, a speaker, a coach, a consultant, a musician, a father, a husband. I can go on and on. There's so many purposes that I can step into. I can be very clear and know what my gifts, talents, abilities, skill sets are, and know what my purpose is. But I'm a human being like everybody else. And so life happens. And when life happens, there could be days that I'm not motivated to step into that purpose. And so when that happens, I need to revisit my why, not my purpose. I know what my purpose is. I need to revisit my why, my motivation to actually do it. And in the way that we do that is by thinking about the who behind our why. If I were to ask you, Michael, or anybody else listening to this podcast, what is your why? Which is something that is obviously a very popular question nowadays. Ultimately, if I dug deep enough, you would eventually tell me a story about someone in your life who means something to you, or who shaped you, or who inspired you. It could be a parent, it could be a grandparent, it could be a friend, it could be a teacher, it could be someone living or not living. But at some point, if we dug deep enough, there would be a who that is the motivation behind your why. And when life hits hard and we know our purpose, but we're not feeling our why, we need to visualize the face of that person, of the who, that motivates us to get up and step back in. I'm from Philly. I'm a big Rocky fan. And for those who haven't seen Rocky, Rocky's a great boxing movie, but there's a moment where Rocky, he knows his purpose is to fight and to win and to do all that. But there's a moment he gets knocked down. And there's this iconic scene where he's down and out, and he's on for the count and about to lose. And he starts visualizing his wife, Adrian, telling him, win, win. He hears her voice, and Mickey, his trainer, in the back behind him saying, get up, you bum, get up, you bum. And so Mickey and Adrian are his who behind his why that gives him the strength to get back up and step back into the ring and step back into his purpose. So we need to be clear about what our purpose is, what's our reason for being, know what our why is, our reason for doing, and then who is the who behind that, because eventually you are going to get knocked down. And when that happens, you need to visualize the faces of the people that will motivate you and inspire you to get back up. Now, in between mission and vision, mission is the impact that when we activate our purpose, we want to see happen on the lives of those around us. And then our vision is the impact that we want to see on the world at scale. So let me back that up for you. You could take a company, any company, for example, that has a very clear purpose statement. So let's take WD-40, for example. They're a really great household name. They're oil in a can. You've used this on a bike. You've used it right around the house for squeaks in the doors. And if you were to ask them, what their purpose is, they wouldn't say anything about their product. They wouldn't tell you our purpose is to be the number one lubricant company or anything like that. Not at all. They would tell you that we exist to build positive, lasting memories in the lives of our employees and all those who use our product. That is what their purpose is, to build positive, lasting memories. What are you talking about? It's oil in a can. Well, for any of you who are parents, you could, the second that I say WD-40, you can smell it. And the reason you can smell it is because undoubtedly at some point in time, you use that to grease up your kid's bike or something. So for instance, my son Bennett, he loves to go fast. And when he was younger, he used to ride his bike really, really fast. And then one day his bike wasn't going as fast as he wanted to go. So I went and got WD-40 to grease the gears. So the purpose of the can was to grease the gears. But my mission was I wanted to see the bike to go as fast as it can. By applying the lubricant, I wanted the bike to go as fast as it can. My vision was to see Bennett, my son, the person riding the bike, to go as fast as he can. And of course, my why, which was my who, was him, right? So when you think about this, I applied the purpose of WD-40 to the immediate mission was to get the bike to go as fast as the bike could go. The vision was to see my son, who was going to be riding that bike, go as fast as he could go. So when WD-40 says they exist to create positive, lasting memories, what they're talking about is when people use their products, what they want to see happen is that they want the people who use those products on whatever they use it to create the memory they want that thing to create. And so they have an indirect hand in doing that by applying the product. They then have actually a bigger vision behind their mission. Their vision is to create a place where people go to work every day. They feel protected and set free by a compelling set of values. They contribute to something greater than themselves, and they go home happy because they believe that when happy people go home, they create happy families. Happy families create happy communities, and ultimately, happy communities create a happy world. People, this is a company that creates oil in a can. And think about how just deep we went. We went from applying that to a bike that creates a positive, lasting memory for me, the user of the product, to help the bike go fast, help my son go fast, impact him. But then they applied that principle to their entire workforce. Hey, if we can have the same impact on our people at work, how do we send them home? How do we use our business as a vehicle? Our number one mission field is our people, the people that work here. If our mission is to create a workplace where they go home at the end of the day feeling happy and fulfilled because they're creating positive, lasting memories for the people who use our products, well, then when they go home to their families, they're going to be happier people, which means their families will be happier, which means the communities they live in will be happier, which means the world will be happier. And their vision is to create a positive, happier world by creating more and more positive, happy people that work in it that use their product.
Beautifully said. It was definitely from A to B all the way to Z. If you want to go down that road, it was so linear and it's so straightforward. It's easy for people to understand that, because I think what happens when people think of their purpose or their mission is very surface level. They say, okay, well, I'm doing this because I want to have a house, or I want to have a car, or I want to not be on the streets, right? They don't necessarily go that deep. So to look at the company to say to create memories for everyone, I mean, like, whoa, like it goes so deep. And life can be surface level or it could be at the root level. And many people, when they live at that surface level, it's almost like they're scraping by. It's like there's something in their mind that they're, maybe missing. And then they start to feel stuck and they start to feel unhappy, and they maybe start to look for external stimulus to make them feel better, whether it be materialistic goods or they look for love in the wrong places. And we can go down the road of what people are looking for in life. But I think it's important to understand, like when a person is trying to not only step into leadership, to step into purpose, but to really change their life, is it something where it has to be a wake-up call? Because we can look at the world as a whole. We can look at the people who are achieving greatly, and we can see the people who are just kind of allowing their circumstances to define them. what is that wake up point for people to say, let me step into something greater than what I am right now?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I don't think there has to be a wake up point. And I think the answer is almost always found in our past. But for most people, unfortunately, it takes a wake up point to go far that back to realize what truly matters to them. And so when I say the answer is found in our past, earlier I referenced that I wanted to be a teacher. The reason that I wanted to be a teacher is my parents went through a very challenging divorce when I was a very young kid. I was 4 and my sister was 1. And we went to go live with our grandparents. And for much of my childhood, I didn't feel seen or known or valued. I was a victim in the circumstance of, kind of this divorce and this broken family dynamic. And I could have chosen to sit there and allow that to define me and done nothing about it. The reason I wanted to be a teacher is because the only constant that I had in my life during that time were my teachers that I went to school with. So when I went to school every day, there was a consistency there. I felt seen, I felt known, I felt valued by the teachers who took an active interest in me and a person. And I wasn't getting that, obviously, outside of school with some of the things that my family was going through and now are on the other side of. And what that did is that inspired me to then want to become a teacher. So my mission, if you were to think very early on, was, okay, well, Davin, why do you want to become a teacher? It certainly wasn't to be paid well, because they're not paid well. It wasn't for summers off. It was because I wanted to help kids feel seen, heard, and valued the way that I had felt seen, heard. I wanted to give people the same impact that I was a beneficiary of as a kid. That became my initial mission. And then what had happened was, as I got caught up in corporate America, there was a point in time where my ladder was up against the wrong wall. I started chasing success and actually started to stray away from my purpose. I took on some really great paying roles within some really great companies, started climbing the corporate ladder. And then in 24, I was driving my daughter to school one day and we were in a really bad car accident. And that car accident, thank God she wasn't hurt, but I ended up going to the hospital and being in a neck brace and having neck and back injuries and laying in a bed for a really long time, thinking about my life, thinking about, would I walk again? Would I speak again? Would I write again? Would I walk my daughter down the aisle? Would I play soccer with my son? All of a sudden I started to take an inventory of all the things that mattered to me. And what I realized was I had strayed away from what mattered to me. And coming out of that accident, I then took an inventory of what mattered most and stepped back into my purpose of helping people be seen, heard, and valued. That's really what led to a lot of this purpose work. I would argue that we all got that wake-up call during COVID. And one of the biggest things that you're actually seeing shift now, the reason that there is so much more focus on purpose and belonging and mattering and impact and significance over success, is because until COVID happened, there was a lot of people chasing the wrong things. And we often chase the wrong things in life and don't realize that we've chased the wrong things until it's too late in life. But COVID provided us a very hard, unexpected pause. And we all know someone who we lost during that time and visualized at any moment that could be us or one of our family members or whoever. And so face to face with mortality, we started to take stock of the things that matter. And so now kind of what's happening is you've got a lot of people that are kind of in a career midlife crisis. They're in an identity crisis because they're struggling between what they do to pay the bills and maybe what their purpose actually is and the impact that they want to have and what their mission is and their vision for their life and what matters to them. There's this massive dynamic unfolding right now. So to answer your question, the answer to who we are and who we want to become and why that's important almost always lives in our past somewhere. It shouldn't have to take a wake-up call to revisit that. Hopefully, if you're listening to this right now, you're taking that inventory right now. You don't have to get in a car accident like I did to have that happen or have to relive COVID to have that happen. But unfortunately, sometimes it usually does take something to pull us off the hamster wheel of life long enough to revisit what's important to us.
Definitely. And I know the audience, one of the reasons they listen to coaching sessions, I'm sure, is not because they like my voice. It's because they get a wake-up call 3 times a week of that they can take action, right? So if something is wrong or it's not going their way, let's give some attention to it. we don't have to wait for the bad moments in our life to happen. And I always, make this joke. I say, people don't call me for coaching to say, hey, Mike, everything is going okay in my life. And just wanted to, just double check with you to make sure I'm on the right path. No, people say, I'm in credit card debt. I have all these problems. My wife is leaving me. We have a plethora of problems. And I'm like, why did you not call me 3 months ago? And most of the people are like, I don't know, why not? And we do the work to figure out why we didn't make that call then. And so the people who are listening are people who are looking 3 months, 6 months, maybe a year, 10 years in advance, saying, okay, what could go wrong? Now, of course, car accidents like the one you had with your daughter, those are going to be abrupt and unexpected. It jolts you awake. And, even though those jolts are not welcome in the sense of what we would consider an ideal day, sometimes they can, give us the realization of how beautiful life can be and how important life is, because we all think we have tomorrow in a sense, right? We plan for it. We have our book tours. We have our programs that we're going to be doing. We have our schedule for work tomorrow if you have to go to work. And we are planning because we're expecting, right? And of course, we can do that for our whole life. And we can maybe expect, maybe when we get to 65, we can retire. Maybe we can take it easy and go on all the vacations that we have dreamed of. And I always say, you can plan for things, of course, but then what are we doing every single day to make sure those are reality? And sometimes people are, set back a little bit saying, you know what, I'm not doing what I need to be doing, right? They're living just, enough, right? When we can live so much more deeper. And one of the things you brought up that was really great was coaching and leadership. And I believe, to excel to the next level, you need some type of mentor, some type of guide, similar to the CEO from, I believe, Costco, that you learn from, that, gave you advice or that gave you some insight, is so important. Teachers can come in all shapes and forms. It's not like you have to go pay for a coach or, go look for a mentor. Sometimes people can just step into your life and they're that lesson for you to either take or to leave. And so I wanted to, bring up the conversation of coaching and leadership, and how would one step into that world of being that coachee or being the person who's that up and coming leader.
So there's a difference between coaching and leadership. Leadership, again, is about leading the entire person or leading an entire team towards who that person wants to become or what they're capable of, or what that team wants to accomplish or what they're capable of. So it's a bigger picture of movement. Coaching is almost surgical. Coaching is very specific to a certain behavior or mindset or thought process that's hindering the objective that you're trying to lead them to, right? So it's a layer underneath. Not that it's less than leadership, it's just a more surgical, targeted approach. If you look at this in the sports realm, for example, I'm a big football fan. And if you think about the structure of football, you've got a head coach, and then you've got an offensive coordinator, and then you've got a defensive coordinator. And then within the offenses and the defenses, you've got coaches. There's an offensive line coach. There's a quarterbacks coach. There's a wide receivers coach. There's a running backs coach. There's a defensive line coach. There's a special teams coach. And you got to ask, wait, why are there all of these coaches when you already have a head coach, an offensive coordinator, and a defensive coordinator? Well, the head coach, the offensive coordinator, and the defense coordinator are leading the team, right? They're play calling. They're leading the body as a whole towards what the team wants to accomplish. The individual coaches that I just mentioned are surgically approaching the specific players in their specific roles during specific times to take a look at a specific play that just happened and say, hey, that was okay, but it could have been better if you would have done this or tweaked this. And so it's surgical in nature. And again, a lot of times I think people mix those two things up. So your answer though was about the coachee and what they need to do to prepare to be that leader. So I think, you don't just become a leader. There's a lot of dialogue around this. Some people think that leadership is given. Some people think that leadership is taken. The answer is yes. It is both given and taken. That is neither a good or a bad thing. I have seen leadership given to people who probably should not have been in leadership. I've seen leadership taken by people who shouldn't have been in leadership. One of the biggest mistakes that companies make is they often promote their top performers into positions of leadership without equipping them to be leaders, because the skill sets that made them a top performer don't necessarily translate to leading people. It's a completely different mindset. Again, coming back to the sports analogy, you could have someone who is an incredible quarterback. That doesn't necessarily mean that because they were an incredible quarterback, they're going to make a great coach. There's a whole different set of skill sets required to lead people. So if you're a coachee that wants to become a leader, and I shared this earlier when, Michael, you asked me, what are the great attributes of a leader? The fourth one that I mentioned was always be coachable. So the first thing that you need to get real with are, where are the areas that I, as a coachee, need to be coached? What are the skill sets, mindsets, tactics that I need to learn in order to become a great leader? Just because you were a great performer or a great player does not automatically mean that you're going to be a great leader. You need to have a great coach that can help you coach you on those skill sets and mindsets to help prepare you to be a great leader. And then even when you get there, it doesn't mean that you arrived. As I shared, the fourth aspect of a great leader is that they're always coachable. So you continue as a leader to ask for feedback. And one of the greatest things that was probably ever created was the concept of 360 feedback. And the whole idea around that was to be able to look at your team and say, hey, team, what am I doing well? And what could I be doing better as your leader? And then to be open to that feedback from your team. And quite frankly, there's not a lot of leaders that do that. And if they did, we'd have we have better leaders and a lot more better performing teams.
Beautifully said, and a wonderful presentation on purpose and leadership today. It was just so, thorough, and what's the word I want to say? It was like jaw-dropping or like eye-opening, inspiring, like all of those put together. And, I'm excited to look at your books. I'm definitely going to check them out because I love personal development books, leadership books, self-help books, all of those, the whole scheme of philosophy in the mind, because I am a forever student in a sense, because I understand I don't know everything and I never will, right? But I can do my best to make sure I'm giving myself a leg up on, I guess you could say, the competition, right? The competition is typically just myself, right? So I don't want to remain stagnant. I don't want to remain the same person I was the day before. I want to enhance myself at, to some level, to some degree. And I know it takes a step at a time. It takes a book at a time, a word at a time, a blog at a time, a podcast episode at a time. And I keep on making progress. And so I encourage people, like if they're, looking at enhancing themselves, looking at their purpose, looking at how they can be better, effective leaders, whatever it be, I'm sure you're going to plug your books right now. So I definitely encourage people to look at that. But before you do that, could you give us some final words and then, of course, tell the audience where they can find you?
Absolutely. Well, it's a pleasure to be on your show. Thank you for those kind words. First of all, I'll tell you where you can find me, and then I'll give you some final words. You can find me on LinkedIn. I live on LinkedIn. I'm very active. I manage my own profile. Someone's not managing that for me. So feel free, connect, reach out, send a message. You could also go to davinsalvagno.com, learn all about me. There's videos there. The books are also there. They're also available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and wherever books are sold. So if you're interested in more, davinsalvagno.com. Final word for you. Life is moving at an unprecedented rate of speed. I feel like it's actually getting faster even as we talk. And so this world is conditioning us to move faster and faster and faster and faster. And purpose is found in the present. And so the more that you can pause and be present in the moment, the more that you can step into your purpose. We are often so busy that we rush by who we need to be because we're so focused on what we need to do. Sometimes our purpose is staring us right in the face and we rush by it because we're so focused on what we need to get done. So if you're looking to find more purpose in your life, the first thing that you need to do is to slow down and be more present in the moment, because purpose is always right in front of us, waiting for us to step into it.
Perfect. Beautifully said. I am going to put all those links down in the description box below. So check out his LinkedIn profile, check out his website. It's going to lead to all his books and all his speaking arrangements. If you ever can get a hold of him and, join one of his events, I'm sure you're going to fall in love. Very similar to how I did today. We had a wonderful conversation, and you brought up a wonderful point at the end, right? Purpose is found in the present. So don't be afraid to slow down, right? Appreciate the time you have. You have kids, parent, spend more time with them. It's very easy to get so caught up in the, all the lucratives of the world, the money, the fame, the accolades. But if you can truly step back and look at your life, you will define and be able to see what your purpose truly is. So I want to thank you, Davin, for coming on, spending some time and talking about your work today.
Thank you, Michael. It was a pleasure.